Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome to Transformation Every Day. I'm Alexander Greb, Consulting Director at CBS Corporate Business Solutions, and today I'm joined by the sales goat, Eric Shaver, the man who would have won the Cadillac in the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. Today's all about selling in the SAP space. Sales has moved from licenses to subscriptions to value and consumption. And that's why in sales we have to kill the word budget, speak in KPIs, cash flow, and margin optimization, and engage executives strategically. Eric and me talk about how to educate customers gracefully, prove competence with specific examples, and build the modern B2B seller. Part accountant, part consultant, and part customer success. Because sales skills come after understanding business value. So if you are an account executive, sales manager, or seller at SAP or as consulting partners, this is your episode. Let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Eric Shaver.
How is this business model going to work? It's neither fish nor fowl. It's brilliant. You finish a ride, you go get a beer, you're hungry, you have a burrito on the little stone patio looking down on the town. It's like, this man is brilliant. Yeah, but something if you ever come to Vermont, yeah, I'll show you the mecca for Stowe, Vermont mountain biking. All right.
I will be there, definitely.
That's
and
good
we are
times.
recording. We got Eric Shaver, the goat of sales. Great to have you.
Hardly the
no,
the sheep.
I always I called you the man who would have gotten the Cadillac.
In Glengarry.
In Glengarry, exactly.
That's high praise. That is high praise. You're putting me up there with Roma, which could be a relative. Who knows? Maybe he could be. There's this by the way, this joke or this reference is age delimited.
I know this is just Gen Z at max. All the millennials already would get their problems with, but we put some hints in the show notes. Very good theater play, very good movie. It shows that we are quite highly educated
and committed to the craft.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's almost like getting an MBA.
And still, we are talking about sales, which is going into an interesting direction with that start. Not only talking about the typical license sales, we're also going to talk about service sales because we also want to involve the consulting community. Let's talk about license sales or subscription sales first.
Yeah.
Last time we talked, we were still very much in the license sales world. Yeah, you go in there, you sell licenses, now you sell subscriptions. Big deal difference, in your opinion?
So, really, no. I mean, the interesting thing is like the technology, the core asset really hasn't changed. Yeah, so you'd think that it would be similar or the same, right? I mean, but it appears to be, right? It appears, I not that it should be, but it appears to be. And even now, shifting from licenses to value realized, right? And pricing based on consumption. And now, just when everybody thought they had the answers, the questions are changing. But no, I mean, this is an interesting topic, right? It comes up a lot, right? Did anything really change in terms of what someone was buying from the on-prem days to the cloud days, now going into the AI-driven, who knows where we are phase? And the answer is no. I mean, if you're buying a core ERP system, if you're buying an enterprise HCM system, you're buying analytics, you're buying a platform. The fact that it's in the cloud, the fact that you went from buying it as a capital asset to licenses, it's just a computer somewhere else, but it's essentially doing what you bought it to do and to operationally impact the business in a very similar way. And yet, it seems to have sort of, it threw our profession off. Like we went from the 5-year marriage of a capital asset purchase of on-prem to really the same 5-year marriage operationally right? If you think about it as an asset. But all of a sudden, everybody started assuming that, the CFO can cancel this, operating spend after 1 year. And no, they really can't. Not if they commit to this type of technology. I think it's mental. It's more mental. But I think now the shift to NRR being, the key and consumption and, the asset hasn't really changed. The sale should not really change. And yet, Alexander, I think a lot of people thought, well, now we've lost our leverage. They're buying it with operating money. They're just buying a license. They're not buying an asset. And it couldn't be any further from the truth in terms of what business to business assets actually being purchased. It's just paid for differently. It's consumed as a service. I think this is one of the big problems out there is people think, oh my God, what if we go to this model now where I'm only going to be paid on consumption or value realized? All is lost. It's like, no, it's just holding us all to a standard of you can't just sell it and disappear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially if you have been what you and me consider as a good seller, the one who argues with the value and with the outcome and did that already before. I guess for this person, nothing really changes in the way he has to operate.
No,
the argumentation of the closing. If you started always your communication with, do you have budget? Of course, this may be a little bit different.
Then the things have changed radically. Right.
Exactly.
If I mean, this is and I know I rail on this a lot, but if you're a budget-based seller in an enterprise selling world, you're limited severely. If that's your only motion, right? If you don't have, that's like, fighting with one arm tied behind your back and expected it's going to be, effective. And that is the problem, isn't it? Is that just look at what IT budgets were back in the on-prem days and how much capital the CIO had to play with, and money was dumber, right?
Yeah.
And another problem is like all the smart money is going towards AI. Investing in AI, even though I think a lot of companies aren't even sure what they're investing in, and now SaaS is being actively managed as an expense item. So selling licenses is a risky business, this might precipitate finally the move to capital allocation decision making and forcing the strategic discussion. And by the way, to the part you said, bringing services right to the front, because now that's a critical aspect of revenue retention, right? And realizing value. The old days of the salespeople saying, let me exhaust the bomb and then I'll kick it over to the licensed people when I'm done. Those days are over. But I think so. They should be. They probably still exist.
When sellers focus on budget, what does that reveal about how they view the customers?
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much and happy listening.
First, it means that they don't know how to have a strategic discussion. And I think it also reveals that they are yesterday's salespeople, right? That are used to selling to IT. I think that even the utterance of the word budget, right, means that you're disqualified from a named executive officer or operator level conversation in the business, because those people don't own budgets. The CEO, CFO, and COO, who should be having strategic discussions and who own capital allocation decision making, they hear the word budget and they think, why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
You should talk to my people who have the allocated budgets for this year that were determined when we did our annual operating plans, and you're in the wrong room. So, but what it tells them, it tells the receiver, you don't know how to talk to me, or you're conceiving of this as a cost, not conceiving of it as a asset that I expect returns from. I mean, it's just fraught with so many implications, but it's more, I'd say it's a little embarrassing if every salesperson didn't still have it drummed into their head that you've got to go find budget. You've got to go understand budgets. To be fair, when selling a true strategic, product or asset, which, in our world, that's all of them. Right. So.
Yeah, and I think we definitely in our business, we are carrying on some, let's say, legacy behaviors, because the CIO had always been, the to-go guy for the typical. It's not only SAP, also the other ERP vendors did it back then.
It's all the same.
Yeah, it's all the same. Yeah, when you look where are the SAP mugs or the Oracle mugs or whatever, you do never find those mugs in the finance department or in the logistics department. You always find those mugs in the IT department, because those are the people you are talking to all the time.
Still, it's crazy.
Still, unfortunately, but the problem is, I think, and at least from my perspective, the realization is now coming up that when you talk about AI, when you talk about these things, it's getting so abstract that definitely that's not the thing you can discuss with the technical responsible CIO with it, who is in most cases anyway a cost center, which means he's measured after delivering a defined service for the lowest possible money, which means anything you can get through the door is a TCO or a certain ROI in that efficiency-based area, not in the effectiveness-based area. The big deals probably you do with the CFO and the CEO and not with the CIO anymore.
Yeah, and this is the chicken and egg problem as well, right? Yeah. Is CFO, unless you get lucky, CFO-centric deals where there's a significant investment being made that gets on their radar, finding us is not as common as we'd like it to be. So that's a created conversation, not a received conversation normally. And I think the myth also is that this is only a construct of the largest of enterprises. Which is simply not true. In the mid-market, there is just as much of a need to optimize working capital, to optimize gross profitability, and to optimize, EBITDA margins through efficiencies operationally, and doing all the things that these things are designed to do. Of course, I'm getting a frog in my throat, now forgive me. But the criminal part of all this is that these conversations could have been taking place 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and that the sheer momentum of our profession and the sheer, hovering around the IT locus of control and budgetary sphere has just made this a habit, and a bad one, which is, it's so fixable. That's the part that bothers me the most, is it's so fixable. Especially with companies like SAP, who have very mature financial value modeling by industry, by product, by operating process, correlated to financial drivers. There's no excuse.
Absolutely. And what I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, was especially this year's Sapphire, they rolled out the completely persona-based model again, which they did 10 years ago already in a certain way. Unfortunately, they moved a little bit away from that, but now they are full back in that. Probably, at least from my perspective here, definitely taking into account that things like AI models, etc., is something you have to talk with the people who are actually profiting for them.
Without question. I think, God, don't even get me started on, the AI mythology that now is being perpetrated everywhere, as opposed to just saying, my take on AI is very simple. The way I use Perplexity or ChatGPT that makes me more efficient and productive
Yeah.
It's pretty much what it's going to be doing within a core technology that still does its base competency, but now with an Iron Man suit on, right? That should be the message, right? And because now, what did all of a sudden core ERP cease to exist, or now it's just been subsumed by the AI Borg, to make a very bad Star Trek reference? No, of course not.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear about the persona thing, right? Because with a persona, you can assume within a fairly reasonable band KPIs. And if you can assume KPIs and they're directly correct, you can speak to, how you contribute to those KPIs.
How do you then, in your conversation with customer executives, put the business value into the forefront? Definitely, probably not via features and functions like it would be in a normal case. But would it be via the KPIs your features and functions actually optimize?
Yes. So this is funny. This is a question I ask all my clients. I say, okay, let's just say I am the executive that you say you want to engage. We really want to engage the CFO. We really want to engage the COO. Just keep it there. You can make it head of procurement. You can head manufacturing. I say, let's say I look at you and I say, what business are you in? Not what do you make, not what are your products, but what business are you in? What business do you think you're in? How should I consider you as a business asset, not a technology asset?
Yeah.
And I've rarely seen a quota carrier who's been asked this particular question, because they don't ask that question. They assume if you don't know how to tell me that, then I'm not going to ask you. But like as an example, I look at any ERP vendor, right? It doesn't matter who it is. The business that you're in is you're in the business of optimizing free cash flow.
Mhm.
That's the business that you're in. How do you do that? Well, now it depends who I'm talking to. Right? If I'm talking to the CFO, I'm going to focus very heavily on the working capital impact we have and how we optimize working capital efficiency and therefore allow working capital to be reallocated to free cash flow on a sustained and significant basis, because that is what the ERP is designed to do. If I'm talking to a head of manufacturing, I'm going to go right into gross profitability, right? And how how they're being measured against gross profit, and how we directly bring down, or I can't use the word twice, it sounds like Austin Powers, too many babies.
At least it's not like Beetlejuice when you use it for the third time.
The third time, yes, that's when you know you're pop culturally have jumped the shark. But
Exactly.
how you affect direct costs and how those direct costs are having a measurable impact on increasing gross margins. And so it goes, right? You can, if you're talking CX and you want to talk to marketing, you better be talking about revenue velocity, revenue growth, or revenue incrementality, and then work backwards from there. It's so easy to take it to the financial driver first. You're just flipping, instead of it being the big reveal at the end of your arc of your story, it's the opening statement, because the technology is a constant. The processes it affects are fairly constant. The changes in cost structures and cash flows that result is pretty predictable. And the value drivers they're designed to change are a constant. So it's not like there's any magic here. You're just putting what is uncomfortable to most people, the financial part of the conversation, and bringing it to the beginning. What a radical idea. But it's, it's so easy. Now, what I love about AI for my own personal, productivity is I can go target account. Great. If they're public, I can find their most recent, financial performance on a specific driver. I can, if I don't know, it's so easy, and it's so easy to check. Like there's not a lot of hallucination on factual data that's out there that large language models can pick up. But I can ask questions. I don't know if salespeople do this enough, and say, what are the actual KPIs that this executive is being measured and paid to achieve? See if it grabs it. If it doesn't grab it, if it's a named executive officer, it probably will, because it's on a proxy statement, at least the high level ones. But if let's say I can't get it from that executive, I can then go to and say, what are the typical top 3 KPIs for this executive in this industry, and get a directional, and then start to cross check that. I mean, the speed with which we can get information, have it served up to us in a very specific way, and then ask follow on questions that get us to a point. I mean, Why does anyone think they have to look at a profit and loss anymore or a statement of cash flows?
Yeah.
There's no need, right? It's all aggregated.
And you absolutely lost any excuses not to do it and not to
There's
talk
no
about
excuse.
this.
So I'm doing this with another client. It's really about prompt engineering now. Not if you this is the vicious cycle. If you're not financially literate enough to know how to prompt on financial lines, you will always get a lesser or corrupted set of replies from AI. But so that's the chicken and egg problem. If you're not financially literate, I can't prompt effectively around those things, which means I'm always caught in this vicious loop, right? Of having, and the other thing I see all the time, every POVs, I'm sorry, just quick rant. Everyone, POV. You got to do a POV for an executive. And I see all these influencers, and I use this term loosely, like on LinkedIn saying, here's the best way to prompt for a POV. And start it with, I am an account executive at this company. Write me a POV for this executive. The first thing you did wrong was you started your prompt with, I'm an account executive. Because now the large language model is going to pick this up from a sales perspective, as opposed to saying, I am the CEO of our company, looking to do a peer-to-peer, outreach to someone at this target account. Give me a point of view tied to how we are both measured and paid, or something like that. But it's little goofy things like that I think if you don't think this way, your prompting follows, and it puts you in the same circular trap at the middle of the org chart.
But that's the never-ending story of in many sales cycles, we still think from our perspective. Yeah, that's our product. That's the features, functions. Hey, he is supposed to think they are cool and wants to buy that now. Yeah, or my own CEO's keynote has been so exceptionally well. Why does the customer not jump on that? Yeah, and I think, like I said, still the biggest topic is that we are able to move out of our own bubble, get into the customer's vision, get into the customer's bubble, and really ask about what is this guy measured on? Am I wrong when I say the difference in that aspect, for example, from B2B to B2C? For example, B2C, you can try to sell via emotions.
Yeah, it's more
because a car is fun, and you want to have fun, and you want to feel great, so you can sell them based on that. But in B2B, you're selling to people who are measured of financial KPIs. This is the only thing that matters in the end, and anything else, your features, your function, your technology, is just there to make these KPIs better. And that's why this is the only way you should approach.
It's the whole point of technology in business. Yeah, well, here's the difference. In B2C, when you're buying B2C, your fiduciary responsibility is to yourself. So you don't care. Look, buying a nice car is the worst investment you can make from an ROI perspective, at least financially. But from the utils or the fun perspective, it's the best one. I think one of the best things you can buy. But when B2B, you have a fiduciary obligation to others, which means you have to allocate funds in a responsible way, but to the assets that produce the highest returns. It's not a choice. If you're public, it's certainly not a choice. If you're private equity owned, you want to keep your job, it's not a choice. If it's a family business and you're extracting all your free cash flow to buy a McLaren, hey, that's up to you. You want to run the company to the ground, that's up to you.
If you would play now Frankenstein, a serious Frankenstein, not the Gene Wilder one, but
that's that. I only know how to play. I only know the Gene Wilder one.
How would you build your perfect B2B enterprise software salesperson?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this. So I've been working on this answer for 20 years. Because this is because it's personal, right? I mean, I am the B2B salesperson that I'd love to, just like we talk about reparenting ourselves sometimes when things weren't perfect in our childhood. Yeah, I want to go back to my original first year in sales and rebuild myself. So if I was Dr. Frankenstein, I had to. I would start with, let's just assume I've been given a, not a bunch of body parts. I've been given a a blank slate, recent college graduate, university graduate who says, "I want to go into sales," and
that's a far better picture. Yeah,
we're making baseline assumptions. Although we can do the Frankenstein thing too. We're making baseline assumptions. They have a business degree. They have an economics degree. Typical thing. Maybe even an engineer who says, "I want to make money" versus build things. Well, let me do Frankenstein first. If it was Frankenstein, they would be part accountant.
Uh-huh.
They would be part accountant. They would be part consultant. They would be part customer success person, post-sale customer success person. They would be a little bit of a value engineer, just maybe the tips of a value engineer, and they would have some industry experience, right? They'd be like an industry principal light. So they wouldn't be expected to do these roles in whole, but if I was to assemble, those are the parts I would assemble into a whole. The good thing is all those things could be learned, but if I were to build that from this is how I'm going to teach you how to do this. Can I take some liberty and say this is how I'll teach you how to do what you do?
Absolutely.
Does that count? Does that count as my Frankenstein model? Because it's so much easier to buy versus build. I just buy the parts and put them together. But and that part would have answered your question. But and then that, of course, that person would have to be part salesperson. But you notice it was the last thing I came up with. I would not teach a salesperson sales skills first.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the biggest problems in our profession. And now 20, 30 years ago, it didn't matter because vendors owned their respective spaces and the brands were bought and all this other stuff, even though we don't want to admit that. But sales skills are the biggest part of the problem.
And you are, with that, totally opposite to probably 90% of all sales education programs.
Maybe more. Maybe
95.
It blows my mind that. So I this is the question I ask salespeople all the time. Have you ever been asked by a prospect, especially as you go higher in the org chart, have you ever been asked by a prospect to give you a PDF of your sales process and the entry and exit criteria for your sales process? Have you ever been asked to give them a PDF copy of all your MedPick, BANT, all your qualifying questions? Send us your discovery questions exhaustively and let us fill those out. Never in the history of the world has someone said, we need to understand your sales process so we can buy this properly. It is a vendor construct, period. Yeah. No one cares. Outside of your four walls, nobody cares about your quota. They don't care about your revenue targets. They don't care about what you need to know to be considered a qualified opportunity. As far as they're concerned, I ask, you deliver. Got it? That's how this game works. And if you're not going to deliver it, I got 3 other vendors who will. So you're telling me, oh, you're not going to give me that unless you meet with my boss? Okay, we'll just go talk to some other vendors. And then you're going to chase me and say you were kidding. So the problem, sales skills are very important at specific times, right? But I'd even argue that the sales process is the flaw because sales processes are delimited by a fiscal year, sometimes even a fiscal quarter. Yeah. The buy side does not have the same requirements typically, unless you get lucky. The qualification and discovery is an extraction process, but it's so agenda driven by the vendor's biases, and the buy side can tell almost immediately that they suffer through only what they're willing to before they call time out and say, look, I've answered enough questions, or I'm just going to lie to you now so you give me what I want. But I would if I was to Frankenstein this baby, I would, from a learning perspective, say, let me teach this monster. It would be, I'm first going to teach you some fundamental financial skills. I'm going to teach you financial skills, not every financial skill, but the financial skills you need to know to understand about how we create financial value. At the very least, how we create financial value. I'm going to put big boundaries around that. So if I'm selling ERP, I'm going to start with, we have to talk about working capital and what that is, and what a cash conversion cycle is, and what the elements are, and why that's so critical, and why free cash flow is influenced by this, and why free cash flow is so important to the business. I'm going to work backwards from what makes the business do what it does, irrespective of your capabilities in your product. This is how they manage the business to these objectives, to these measures, and here are the operational factors they have at their disposal to optimize that. So I would say, I'm not going to teach you a blessed thing about how to do a sales pitch or how to qualify or discover until you understand why the hell that company would even consider listening to what you have to say. Because at the end of the day, they know you're going to ask us for money, and you're probably going to ask us for a lot of money, but they're actually not worried as much about the money that you're asking them for. What they're really interested in is, can we realize the returns, right, that we need from an asset like this, or that we'd expect from an asset like this, or we have no expectations. You tell us what those are, and we'll tell you how favorably or unfavorably that compares to alternative uses of the same money. In other words, McKinsey and Bain and Boston Consulting Group, I believe, still do not have salespeople. I'm pretty sure the consultants sell the consulting that they do. And there's a reason for that, because they are subject matter experts in what they do, not some quota carrier who's memorizing a PDF or who has to keep saying, I'm not sure, but I can definitely get you an answer. We'll put that on the parking lot of our meeting, which is the dumbest. Yeah, it's like, okay. But it would be financial first, then it would be operational, understanding of the connectivity between the operational impact and the financials, operating process and functional areas and how that works. And then it would be, okay, now let's connect how the technology affects these things, not without getting too technical. And now your head is burned in. Money first, returns first, cash flow first. Cash flow to your point, Alexander, cash flow justifies investment, not feature sets. But that would be the key thing. The sales skills are easy. I had a young, very smart, of course. I was in a boot camp years ago in Newtown Square, and I had this young value engineer, Canadian kid. He was about in his late 20s, early 30s, business school, he fit the pedigree. He clearly came from good stock, and he had the arrogance of that. But, I could see him rolling his eyes in the beginning of the day, because he's like, this is sales training. Yeah, most of the people in here are salespeople, but I'm a value engineer. Why do I have to listen to this? And by lunchtime, he came to me and he said, I got a question for you. And I knew, of course, it was a loaded question. And he said, do you think it's more effective to teach me with my skills as a value engineer how to sell? Or do you think it's more effective to try to teach a salesperson what I understand and know and put that into a selling context? And I said, I could teach you how to sell in a week. Basic skills, right? Basic closing technique, good questioning, but you probably know this, being a former consultant, how to ask questions better than the average salesperson, how to progress something forward. You have project management skills, I'm sure, which means you already know how to progress a project forward, do scoping, come up with a critical path. I said, so yeah, obviously I'll take you any day, as opposed to trying to teach a salesperson the financial and business knowledge you have. That would take months to a level of competency where you are, and that's the truth. The model we currently have was built for decades ago, and a lot has changed. And if you look at all the posts coming out of the Microsofts, Satya Nadella is saying SaaS is going to be completely, gone in a year or two. And you've got senior VPs at Microsoft saying, look, AI is going to take over qualification and deal progression soon. Two core functions of enterprise sellers. I think that's extremely healthy, albeit scary, because anybody who says AI is going to replace us, it's not Skynet yet. Skynet may be in the future, but it's not Skynet yet. It's going to allow us to allocate our human energy to things that humans should be doing, and allocate repetitive tasks and things that a human really shouldn't be touching anyway. If you can be replaced by AI, it means your task was not really of high value. So anyway, I went all over the Frankenstein answer there, but there's so much here.
No, you answered it beautifully. So the Eric Shaver billboard on maybe not Times Square, but Fifth Avenue, the very large one, it would state, sell it to the KPIs.
It would be absolutely, if you're not selling to how someone is measured and paid, and you think you're getting them emotional to a state where they have to feel they have to move, not just think, then I'd argue you're not selling anything. Selling is about getting people emotionally engaged. We think it's to their prefrontal cortex. it's really selling to their limbic system. Right?
And that's a big misunderstanding, yeah. When people may say like, oh, financial statements, they're not emotional, or selling into KPIs, they're not emotional. But when you make the KPIs look good for your customer, they get emotional.
Without question. It seems dry on paper, right?
Exactly,
like financial statements and KPIs. Is there anything more emotional than how someone gets paid?
Exactly.
Yeah, how they're measured, right? By their bosses. I can't think of anything more emotional than that. And I think the biggest sin that's happening right now is that we're selling technologies and services and selling capabilities that absolutely correlate to how people get measured and paid. And not I think we think too black and white in sales. It does. This is not going to make you achieve this in the absence of all else. Achieving your targets is an optimization problem, not this binary act. If I do this, then my target's hit. There's a lot of levers that have to be pulled, and there's a lot of factors. And the only reason why people will suffer through the risk and the variability of technology is because the belief that it is a high returning asset when it's properly operationalized and funded and operated.
And I think exactly. And to be fair, at the moment, definitely the urge, or let's say the voice in your head, talk about features and functions and so on. It is difficult to refrain from that, with all the new things happening each day on AI and so on, and talking about or bringing up buzzwords or dropping things like Joule or AI or whatever. It's so easy, and it's also so tempting, to do, because media is going crazy, social media is going crazy about these new possibilities. How are we able to find that fine path? To not fulfill these kind of temptations too much, but still are in the area of finding the right value cases without stepping too much into that mud of talking too much about features and functions.
So now we're getting into neural pathway development. Now we're getting into neuroplasticity of the human mind. Bear with me. I actually have a place to go here. The reason why we speak about capabilities, we speak about this new AI powered feature, or even worse, a lot of companies like marketing puts a name on their AI, which is apropos of nothing to the buyer, and you've given it this cool name like Excelsior, or whatever the hell you want to call it, exactly, and people are like, "What is that?" And we think the what is that is a sign of interest, as opposed to I have no idea what you're talking about. But as soon as you say, "Oh, it's RAI," like got it, I understand. You did a loose integration with ChatGPT, and now you're calling that.
Call it goofy or whatever.
It's the problem is that we speak extemporaneously. We speak in real time based upon the neural pathways that we've built around our knowledge and communication. So in other words, if you have a steady diet of capability speak and product speak and functionality speak, and you've repeated it and you've burned it in, and this is your recall, especially when you're nervous or you're in a stressful moment, which is in front of a prospecting customer, there's always that question: did I say the right thing? Is it the right time? Is it the right person? There's all this stuff wheeling, this flywheel going. What happens? We default. That's called the stopping mind in Zen culture, Japanese culture, right? It's you're stopping to think. All of a sudden, you default back to the neural pathways that you've built that are all about the language that you speak every day. So the only way, I think, in selling moments, right, where you're not in a sanitized vacuum, to say, I'm now having the ability to choose a different neural pathway to follow, is that if you've built that neural pathway. So you've got to, to think I'll memorize it, and in a stressful moment, it'll come out the way I wanted it to, is a fool's errand, right? Is you've got to truly synthesize and understand the financial aspects and all that. And, I had a physics teacher in sophomore year of a university, second year of high school, gymnasium, I think. I'm always trying to make sure I'm in Europe, who loved to say mathematics is the language of science. Anything I show you here can be represented as an equation. And I love that analogy. Cash flow is the language of business. You can represent anything as a cost structure and its cash flows to truly represent it, in whether it's a process or it's a plant and equipment or it's technology. And so we need to build the cash flow or that knowledge, and then how to speak to it, and build those neural pathways through repetition and practice. So when we come to the moment where we've got to speak, we have not just one line to follow, to choose from, one bucket of words to choose from. We actually can say, okay, in this case, I can go over here because I've built that, and my recall is not limited by memorization. It's the neural pathway has been built. Which is, no one wants to hear that. That's the hard answer. It means you have to commit to it, right? It's I have a fear. I always get upset with myself that I don't have a Roman breastplate, right? But I'm like, I got to work out a lot and eat right to do that. But I don't want to do those things. But I'm still sad that I don't have that. It's like, okay, well, so now I'm in the realm of magical thinking. So that's foolish, right? It's like, do the work, see the result. But that's how it has to be done, Alex. The way I'd say is there's no other option. You either build the competency, you synthesize the information, or you're going to be caught in this never-ending loop of defaulting to feature, function, solution talk.
Still, until now, we have talked about let's call it the competent customer. I know I'm walking on thin ice now, because I not in rare cases, I of course counted customers who actually had no clue about their own, the way they are measured and their own KPIs. Yeah, because it happens. Yeah, you have companies who just are not that strict, who are just run that way, and so on. And interestingly, those are in many cases the one who ask actually, then show me a demo. Yeah, because they themselves do not know how to measure the usefulness of that stuff that you want to sell in that case. How do you approach these cases? How do you educate customers in that way without them feeling educated?
So, and this is the key, is it right? And do we treat educating them as maybe a bad thing or a condescending thing or something they'll take? And the answer is maybe, right? So this is something I feel very strongly about as well, and that is that we sell what we sell every single day. It's our area of expertise. It's what we're paid to do. It's what we should be very proficient at what we do. They are going to be more proficient in what they do if they run a plumbing company that makes very specific things. It's not our world either. But we should be proficient enough in a particular vertical or sub-vertical. If we sold to the companies there more than once, we should be operationally familiar with how what we do affects the aspects of their business that our technology or whatever is designed to impact. And when I find that, when I assume a prospect or a customer knows these things until they tell me they don't, or until you could see on their face you're losing them, because that then gives you that, we're all supposed to be consultative. It gives you the ability to stop and say, without shaming them, this is what these assets are designed to do. It is not always common knowledge at your level, given what you guys do, that this is how this affects your business, because it's in the very specific context of our assets. So you give them that graceful out. I'm not telling you you don't know how to run your business, or you don't know the KPIs. I'm telling you, in the context of what we do, which there's no way you would know this at a level we would. There's no shame in that these are the KPIs that are affected. And then it goes more to a guidance-based motion. This is why you should be considering these assets from an operational and from a financial perspective, if you're going to consider them at all. It should be in this context. And then the questions should follow that are not typical sales questions. If we could do that, would it be worth funding? Terrible sales question, right? Because you're just leading to a yes or a no. It should be what is the best way to get you to a place where you can make a thoughtful investment decision, an operational decision around these. For that, we need your guidance. Once we know that, we can then take you to where we take your peers, what we do every day with people in your position. So we over rotate so much on discovery. Yeah. And this, if I hear one more time, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen more than you speak, understand them. It's like they don't understand that. They certainly don't understand them in the context of what you do. They're looking for guidance. They're looking, executives especially value expertise.
Yeah.
Show me you've been to this movie. Show me that you've been to this rodeo many times. So many salespeople hear the siren song of, well, we've been around for 50 years and we're the old one and we're the grandfather and we're not cool and we're not native and it's like when the economy gets unstable, you want to talk to grandpa. Mm-hmm. Who's seen it a million times.
Who's seen it all.
Yeah. Who says, look, you may not be the slickest, coolest, but I know when I look to my left and my right that you're there. Yeah. And it's funny, you start to realize experience can be cool. Stability can be cool. Depth of networks, partners, knowledge on not the latest tech, but operating processes and how to optimize them. It gets pretty cool when the financials start getting scary. When money's dumb, money tends to gravitate towards the cooler things. Mm-hmm. When money gets smart, and money's pretty smart right now, in corporations, they have to be thoughtful. I mean, look what's going on, everyone's still very tentative, right? And I mean, if you just look at where the global economy is right now, the uncertainty just around tariffs and supply chains and all this, it's very hard to do operational planning in this environment, but it doesn't mean investment stops. It means budgets get managed to optimize margins when you're seeing erosion, but capital allocation can't stop. Strategic investment to intermediate and longer-term assets still has to occur, or the executives get replaced. And God, I wish someone taught me that in my first year of selling true enterprise products. Because then it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about budgets anymore. That's not the key issue.
And I think the far largest number of enterprises at the moment, they realize that, okay, maybe my old 20th century technology, which my ERP or my whatever runs on, is not the right tool for those multi-crisis scenario that we're facing now, for those problems of the 21st century. But of course, not everybody of them has the perfect answer to that. Everybody's unsure and everybody has question marks. And if you go in there and you have a vision on how to guide their business and how to I, for example, I know one customer who is in an industry which is getting almost toxic at the moment. Because analysts are giving him the thumbs down. So he has to transform into different industries now. And he's doing mergers and acquisitions and so on and so on. And of course, in this situation, you need from an ERP vendor or from a software seller also part of guidance. Yeah. Like, look, I know other customers who are in the exact same situation like you are. Yeah. You're not alone. That's the first message. And the second message is it's not wrong to ask questions. It's not wrong to have the question mark, and it's not wrong to be unsure because everybody's unsure. But we have seen that doing this leads to that. It could apply also in your case because your case is similar to A, B, C, D, E. Yeah. And still you are quite far away from the features and functions discussion, which may come maybe later when you're talking about the implementation and so on. But this is a 100% strategic and business and financial discussion.
And people want to hear things like, not, we've seen this before. Yeah. That's a platitude. They want to hear, when we have seen this situation in your space, this is what we've seen. This is how we guided your peers. This is how this problem has been addressed. But with that said, are we going down the right path? Or should we be looking at this differently? They want you to demonstrate your competency with the words that are coming out of your mouth. When we've seen this be specific, right? You lose people in, we do this all the time, as you can imagine. Look at all these logos. We've done this with them as well. They're like, okay, but are they happy? How old are they?
Yeah.
Are they still paying you? I mean, that doesn't help me. I'm not paying for someone else's validation. I'm paying for the belief that when you worked with them, we're talking about the same thing or similar things. Then it does help to have that validation. We don't get specific enough because I think partly because the division of roles, right? Well, this specialist works on this and that's, but there, you work on the operating process, you work on the business case, you work on the technology, you work on the architecture. And then you've got this salesperson who's supposed to synthesize all this stuff and almost speak with a level of competency that and that's extremely hard to do. But we don't do enough of, as we aggregate all our success stories, we don't build that into use cases that are business focused enough. It's use cases around, well, this is how this technology was applied. And if I could, there's two, one's a word, one's a phrase. I'd kill the word budget in any salesperson's vocabulary. If the buy side wants to talk about budget, I've gone on about this, but I'd also kill TCO.
Uh-huh.
Because unless all your asset does is generate lower total cost of ownership, which most products do with far more than that, that's usually the smallest financial impact by swapping out infrastructure or reducing maybe some headcount. The majority of cash flow impact is coming off of the process change and output and efficiency. And that is a factor of 10, sometimes greater than the TCO. But what's easier to model? TCO.
TCO has always been the lazy guy's sales pitch.
Absolutely.
Because that's where you can model tools on. Yeah, that's where you do not have basically to care about the customer, because you can tell him, give me certain KPIs, and then you can make a case out of that. But it always killed any value-based, any strategy-based discussion from the beginning. And it always pushed the whole discussion to the CEO away from the CFO and CEO.
Yeah, the operators are like, sounds like you should be talking to IT then.
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
like so. Or it doesn't matter what it is. If it's HCM, sounds like you should talk to my CHRO. They manage the P&L impact of that functional area. Go deal with them. That's the sin is that with a lot of my clients, what I find is what the value engineers know and understand, what the industry principals know and understand, that knowledge, the narratives, how they convince an executive how to make a business decision. That narrative doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, or whatever you want to call it, over to the sales side or the marketing side, by the way. Because if you look at sales plays and marketing messaging and positioning, I get it. Marketing is a one-to-many message, but they're either too specific to the technology end and not specific enough to the business end, or just too abstract when they talk about business value to the point where it means nothing. Right? Revenue growth. We do that. Just anything more you're going to give us on that, or just, we're going to improve your customer experience and your revenue is just going to grow. It's like, that's a big topic. There's a lot of ways to affect customer experience, and a lot of people just say 1, 2, skip a few 100, and there you are. And you just lose all credibility. Yes, keep the message simple to executives, but you still have to have it in the context with which they can say, I understand, the specific levers you're pulling operationally. I see how you're getting to revenue growth by applying technology or product to this process. Everything ultimately is going to be the result of a process. Right? There's some process being executed that has a cost to it and has output associated with it. I don't know why we make this so complicated. It's
it's in the end all about asking the question, what does my counterpart, what keeps him up at night, or her?
Yeah.
What kind of KPIs does this have? How can I help them? It's easy, but in a certain way, what could be the worst thing that could happen to sellers in this area?
You mean if they,
5 years?
You mean if we continue on this
if
path.
we continue on this path.
Yeah, obsolescence. I wouldn't say that if AI wasn't making the strides we're making, and if AGI wasn't looking so much closer than we thought it was. But when artificial general intelligence hits, and some argue it's already done so in many ways, there will be a replacement. It's the same reason. I won't get into politics, but it's the same reason that supply chains have been outsourced to halfway across the world.
Yeah,
that it's still cheaper to ship something, through the Suez Canal to come to the U.S. from Asia than it is to manufacture it here, because the cost structures are such that the profitability is much higher if you do that. And it's the same thing. If AI proves, and it is starting to prove, that an agent can do 70% of what I'm paying a human to do, then the CFO is going to get busy modeling out, okay, great, how much of this can we have an agent do? It's just, you're just outsourcing to a lower cost structure that is probably more consistent, more efficient, and more knowledgeable, right? I mean, do you want to deal with a human, or do you want to deal with a large language model that can grab almost anything and even be customized to a custom GPT? So I think we're dealing with, I was used to joke that there was an obsolescence factor in time. I think AI has now made that obsolescence real. Do I think it's full obsolescence? No. But I also think this garbage of people buy from people, like that constant thing. It's like, look, if people also avoid people, right? People avoid salespeople more than they go to us. They only come to us when I can't find it online.
You just have to look into your LinkedIn inbox.
That's there it is, right? If that was happening, why do I have all this junk in there? Why do people seem so desperate? No, but I think the reality is that we don't know. We don't know. Maybe it is, the Terminator is here, and maybe Skynet is real. But I think the reality of it is that a lot of the repetitive tasks, and a lot of what we do is a repetitive task, is going to be taken away from us for in favor of lower cost structure and higher profit margin execution. And that the good news is that the salespeople that do double down on the factors that are best executed by a human, as required by the buy side, not the sell side, not the sell side's opinion, but the buy side says, I want to talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. So the good news here is that by stripping away, and it will happen, the repetitive tasks in our profession, it now frees up capacity to focus on the things that really matter. And I tell salespeople this all the time. I said, look, a large language model can replace almost everything you do. Every sales process that's ever been out there can be grabbed because it's public at this point. What's not public are your business cases. What's not public yet, what's not out on servers on the internet, are your proprietary business cases and or the tribal knowledge you have specific to an industry or sub-industry on how you operationalize and drive to a cash flow model. That's not going to be replaced anytime soon because it's proprietary normally. And then it has to be sanitized. And then even when, the only thing that gets out to the internet are the really, really sanitized, they're not even business cases. So, yeah, but I think the real threat is that AI has made this very real, that we could see a significant replacement in our ranks. And mainly because buyers don't want to deal with us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's their decision. They've already voted with their feet.
One other topic, how the enterprise software providers try to scale, next, of course, to the AI topic, is by trying to start with digital selling, for example, or partner-led selling in that area, because it's quite natural. Normal, let's call it an SAP account executive. If you are in a certain industry and you have a certain area, you have 80 customers who are assigned to you. And from those 80 customers, quite natural, you maybe know 15 and you can take care for maybe 10, for example. And
what happens with the other 70 is beyond your reach. And of course, as such, you go into partner territories or digital selling models where somebody sits maybe in Spain and tries to sell enterprise software to a mid-sized company in Bavaria, which I have a certain opinion about that, if that really works out or not, but that's a different topic. What's your take on that? How do you see this kind of decision strategically? Do you think like this is just something which is an immediate phase until AI has taken over more activities there, or do you think like this is definitely the future which will dominate selling in the next 5 to 10 years?
The digital model, the digital sales model.
The digital model, yeah.
Yeah, whether it's partners or it's your own people that are,
Exactly.
like you said, I'm in Barcelona, but I'm selling to the Nordics. Yeah, it's like, okay. To be fair, they usually have someone from the Nordics who's loving Barcelona, then selling back to their country people. It doesn't change things. So the operative word, the continuity line there is still the word selling. Yeah. Whether it's I show up at your doorstep, jumping out of my BMW, or I am, I'm now completely online and engaging you digitally. The act of selling is still the common thread, and I think that, I think that the buy side doesn't really care about the means by which you're engaging them. If the message, if the asset, if what you're selling them has value to them and you know how to communicate it, I think that the idea of companies trying to lower cost structures by going through partners and going through digital means is efficient in terms of cost structures. But I find I've worked a lot with partners, and the partners still need the core knowledge, narratives, and assets to have a business conversation, and they're further from the headquarters. They're further from where the resources are, and partners are notoriously, especially service partners, are notoriously less capitalized, if you will, on their go-to-market to have the same value engineering and industry people and all that. So they still rely on the vendor. I find that the digital model usually has much younger people. It's kind of the inside sales. We don't call it that. Who are earlier in career and who are less experienced. But it doesn't change the fact it's still, I'm trying to communicate a message that, regardless of how I delivered it to you, resonates, lands, and drives motion. If your company can do that at lower cost structures, I think the digital model would be stupid not to do that, right? Just like, what did we learn during COVID is that you don't have to go to the office to actually produce. But I think the biggest thing is whether it's digital. I think the digital model is just as likely to be as pressured or replaced by AI as a typical field model or even partner model. My experience with partners is, unless they're truly a reseller and that is their primary business model, a lot of partners are service providers who feed their primary revenue and profit model through services related to selling a technology asset. Is it in their interest to eat what you kill? Better margins and all that? Sure. Everyone still needs the same thing. Everyone still needs, do I have the ability to get to the essence of the business reasons for doing this quickly to the right people who need to hear it? Can I guide and influence their capital allocation decision making? And can I make this a limbic priority versus a cognitive priority, right? I mean, you need both. But I think the move to digital is just a way of lowering cost structures. It's how do I get my SG&A cost structures down to drive revenue? And of course, companies are going to do that. But I think what you've seen is they're all starting, just like the SDR, BDR model. My kids did it. They're 1 year out of uni. They have no idea what they're doing. They heard they can make a lot of money, but they're still selling the complex technology that requires experience and knowledge and all this. And we're using them to try to get executives engaged, in a meaningful business conversation. You can do it if you give them the absolute right script, and you flog the practice until they say it with confidence. But what do we see? Every message I get from a BDR, SDR, I can tell immediately it was written for them. It's an outreach sequence, and it's of almost no value.
But how do you learn to lead this kind of business conversation? Okay, in my case, for example, it was decades in consulting, digging the dirt all the time. Making your hands dirty, doing the stuff which is necessary. Now you have this kind of smooth sales career path. Now going to an academy where you learn your stuff, and then you sitting maybe in a digital selling center, or you are in the HQ and in an organization and try to do that. Do you think it's a good idea, for example, for consultants, for sellers to say like, okay, I start with a consulting career at first to get that kind of business acumen? Or is this something, because I have heard other opinions where somebody says like, I do not even want to have my sellers too competent in those areas, because then they mix up. I want that kind of separation between this is my value person and this is my selling person.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perception, I think, is I've got to go do this for years to get this competency, and I'm not going to do that, of course. So why bother? No, this is another thing that I find fascinating, is that we will, as salespeople, we will get beaten into our heads. This is how you execute the sales process. These are all the phases of the sales process. These are all the qualifying questions. You have to master them. You've got to put everything into the CRM system. You have to know how to interpret. You don't have to, we get this over rotation on, which is very process heavy. Look at the sales process for enterprise selling. You break it down into its 7 stages, and it's 8 entry and exit criteria within, and then all the stakeholders you have to engage, and all the questions you have. If you think about all the energy that's put into that salespeople have to learn and execute, if you just took half of that and said, just like we're teaching you how to speak like a salesperson, how to question like a salesperson, how to do these things, we're going to teach you with the same brain. Here's how you execute this as a consultant would. Here's how you, speak and understand and, query and guide. So you're getting 2 skills in parallel that don't require, a lot of salespeople are expecting their first year of sales, having no experience, to go hit a quota for the year. And, here's the process. We get you a lead. If you're net new, you may not have any leads. So here's the pitch, and here's how you work with SDR. And so that learning can be taught just the same without saying to someone, look, you can sell consultatively without having to be a consultant for 5 years in the field. Because, and why? Why is that? Because sales is not the do side of technology implementation or assessment or scoping. We're the communication side of that. So we're not going to actually dig into the tech stack. We're not going to actually dig into the sales the operating processes and do the business case. We're the ones where the communication are. We're the ones who have to know how to speak to it. We have to understand how to speak to it with fluency and competency. So if you think about it, it really is just learning, not to be too precious here, but it's learning your lines. Not just learning them as rote, like a parrot would then say them. Learn them and then understand why you're saying them, and then go from memorization to synthesis. But by the way, you don't have to do any of those actions you're closing for. There's people that we're putting into place who will do the heavy lifting. You just have to convince them to do it.
It is like learning a language, and people then will connect you with the other people on the customer side who sound exactly like you. And this is what is my opinion all about. Yeah, when you are able to talk the business of a CFO, for example, then you get connected to the CFO. When you are able to talk the business like a CEO, you are connected to the CEO of the customer side. And this is, I think, the most important area in that.
I can't agree more. Because what happens, let's just say for the sake of argument, and I'm not my grandmother's very upset. I don't, well, she's not with us anymore, but that I don't do this. But let's say I said to you, Alexander, hey, can we switch to German? And then we just I started speaking to you in fluent German. Well, I'm an American. I'm not German. But if I had a really good, maybe even a bit of a Bavarian accent, all of a sudden I'm going at you fluently in German. The first thing you're thinking is, holy crap, this guy speaks my language. Yeah. I know he's an American. He's very American. And yet, all of a sudden, it's almost like you're forgetting that. Now it's like, if I'm good, let's say my accent sucks, but I'm speaking fluent German. You're like, I'm fully aware that you're not a native speaker, but you're speaking my language, and that changes things. You understand, maybe you also understand, maybe our culture, maybe you also understand, when's the last time you were here? I mean, and it's to your point, if you speak the language, like I'm not saying, Alexander, guess what? I am German now. You're going to be like, no, you're not, but you speak it. But I know that, but I'm not impersonating a native. And, people think, well, if I go to that level, you're not impersonating a CFO if you know how to speak to them. You're not impersonating a head of manufacturing. If you prove to them, I can speak your language, you all of a sudden start making other assumptions that you understand. You probably understand my world, or I can now talk to you in a different way. Salespeople, we manage salespeople like mushrooms. We all do. We keep them in the dark and we cover them with crap. They're on a need-to-know basis, right? They're on a need-to-know basis. I'm only going to tell you what I think you need to know to get what I want. Whereas, the solution consultant comes in, the value engineer comes in. They're like, oh, okay, I can give them some substance. I can talk to them more candidly. I can do this because I know they're going to do something with it of value to me. But if I know you're just the mouthpiece, so the problem with being the mouthpiece is they know we're the mouthpiece. But if that mouthpiece shows expertise and depth and some fluency, all of a sudden, assumptions will. It's called. If you look at social psychology, it's called social or professional proofing, and it happens very quickly. And people do jump to conclusions if you're showing competency, and that isn't that exactly what we want as salespeople. So the dirt matters for the consultant who has to do it. The knowing how to tell that consultant's story, getting more than just the veneer, is what the salesperson has to do. I'm not a mile wide and an inch deep, as they say. I'm still a mile wide, but I go a foot deep. But then that's when I hand it off. And I think the problem is that most people look at us and say, "You're clearly the salesperson. I need to talk to somebody who's a subject matter expert." And we say, "Great, let's set up that meeting." And we fulfill their vision that we're a PA.
That's a good point that you made, and we want to segue to that now. Consultants, you're now entering the world not of license or subscription sales, but selling services, selling implementations, selling consulting projects, whatever. How big is? Let's start very generally. How big is the difference between selling a subscription and selling a service?
Financially, very little. And I'll explain that. In other words, both a services salesperson can't make any services revenue unless the technology they're implementing is discussed. The technology salesperson, the licensed salesperson, can't have a credible conversation with a senior executive about the assets they're trying to get funded, because services often play a substantial role, not only in the economics of the investment, but in the realization of the cash flows that they think they're buying. If I'm a technology salesperson, I'm selling, all due credit to the cloud with constant updates being pushed out. I'm selling something that's static, designed to do a specific thing. The services have a lot of variables. Right now, we're getting into current process and processes that have to change, and what is automated, and what do we have to do? It's bespoke, and how do we ensure adoption, and how do we ensure that it's all the challenge lies in how something gets operationalized. So I'd argue financially, this is the big problem with licensed salespeople. Financially, if you're going to do a net present value, IRR, and payback period equation, it must include all the cost structures, including the services, which means all of that scope has to be contemplated, at the very least, at a level that can be modeled out and defended. a lot of quota carriers on the license side get in the trap of just quoting license, talking about license, and you're immediately putting the executive you're talking to in a position to make a corrupted decision, especially if they're assuming those costs include implementation. So financially, both parties have to talk about, because they're both inextricably linked, the cash flows over time, the cost structures related to those things, and how ultimately you're driving net positive cash flow to the business through the combination of those things that are both required of each other. So that's why I say financially, it's the same conversation. In other words, the license and the services people should be on the exact same page. We should be talking about the exact same business case, with variables being around the BOM and variables being around the services that are required to implement it. From selling a service, though, selling a service is, selling technology is an amorphous asset. Selling services is an amorphous asset. And a lot of it is you have to build the prospect or customer's belief that this intangible will yield predictable results. And that's the hardest part of both of them, right? Is how do I take into account the variability, the risk, if it's services, how mature is your practice area, right? How deep is your practice area? How well-versed are you in the edge conditions of this industry or space? I'm betting on people, which can have a high variability. With technology, it's maybe less risky, right? We know software has bugs. Its feature completeness is always in question. But, the variability, I think, is less, unless you're lying to them about what it does. But I'd argue the services salespeople have the harder job, because instead of selling a fixed price list, you're selling a time and materials engagement. And
in many cases,
in many cases, unless you package things up, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But CFOs they don't understand technology. They're intrinsically suspicious of service providers who they expect to do what the mechanic does. You bring a car to the mechanic, and the first thing they say is, from what I can see, this is what it's going to take to fix this. But once I get in there, I don't know. You're immediately like, here we go. And I have to completely trust you that you're not screwing me over because I can't do what you do. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest problem is the separateness of these two sales motions. That still seems to exist. There seems to be with licensed people, let's sell the BOM. We're going to try to extract as much money as we can on a bill of materials. I don't know if the name has changed. It's probably the same thing. If we bring the services people in, we're going to be stealing from Peter to pay Paul. It's going to start to erode, as the CFO, or they say, look, we only have so much to invest and maybe we should go lighter here because we also know we've got to account for services potentially getting into issues. So I don't know if I'm over answering, under answering, or not even answering the question you asked, but this is such a big topic in the technology world of the rift or the gulf between these organizations that are supposed to be attached at the hip. To me, the fact that a services salesperson isn't in the room during the account planning of the licensed rep, and they're not proactively collaborating, right, on how to optimize the revenue opportunities for both parties. And instead of saying, let's do subtraction, we're not doing multiplication. And going big. The beauty of services, and sales working together is you can go big and say, look, let's start from operationalizing everything that we see that would be appropriate. If we could see the company's financials, where the company needs the most, intermediate to long-term financial incrementality, for lack of a better word. But Alexander, I still think these are two different rooms where these planning's occurring and the strategy and the execution. It still seems like these two tribes don't trust each other.
That's true. Yeah, especially and maybe one big difference is that I think you have a quite common homogeneous model of how to do sales when you're selling the software. But in services, you have companies who rely on the partner-led selling, where the partner is basically the one who is making the connection and acts as a key account manager in that certain way. And you have others who have an actual sales force, with sellers walking around and going to the customers and doing their job there. Do you see any preferable setup from your side where you think like, okay, this works more in these kind of cases, or this is maybe the new way to go and the other thing is the outdated, more idealistic way to go?
I think, first of all, I think that the traditional model of we have a quota carrier who's a direct sales rep, and then we have the indirect part of our sales team, maybe a partner business manager or somebody who says, I manage the partnerships. First of all, I think they're looked at as, the partner side is looked at as children of a lesser god. You're not the direct quota carrier and you're dealing with third parties. And, the only time that the direct team seems to be interested is when, the partner says, I got a relationship and I can get you in here and all that. Yeah. I think the model itself is ineffective. I think it's flawed, because it still takes these tribal feel to it. I think the right model, where I've seen this done pretty well, is where you have your own internal services that acts as governance or a bridge, right? Who says we're not going to own every services engagement, but we do act as governance, or we do act as a means of project or program managing, all the parties involved, where it doesn't feel threatening to the partner, right? It's kind of, the lines are as bright as they can be. It's not bright lines, but as it can be. But I think the way to make this work in a real world way is you cannot take away the fact that compensation drives salespeople. Period. Right. And so if you make the compensation model require a pairing of the services side and the license side, and payout is dependent on upfront collaboration and strategizing and engagement, you're never going to see any change. It's going to be, then it'll be up to the individuals, and does the quota carrier understand the value that, I will say this though, but not only just from a compensation perspective, but because you're seeing such movement towards value realization being the mechanism by which vendors are going to be paid now, consumption and realized value. That's real. That's scary, right? Because that, value realization has been done so poorly in our space for a long time. It didn't matter during the on-prem days because you got your maintenance no matter what happened, right? In fact, if they never installed it, it was the best, right? You didn't take any service issues, and it was pure profit, your maintenance. Then we went to cloud, and then, net revenue retention last year was the it kid, right? Every SaaS company seemed to quickly turn on a dime from growth to growth and profitability, or net revenue retention's everything. Net new, we're going to back off on that and shift those resources. Why is that happening? Because you're seeing pressure on pricing models to be more oriented towards value realization. So that's the other side of it is, if pricing models becomes the norm, then the realization of value is partner dependent, assuming the software works. Right?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing that I observed is that, okay, it's an open secret that all the suppliers, that all the system providers are more forced into, hey, we have to bring our partner structures into the game. They have to sell more. We have to do partner-led selling. And as such, of course, you bring together, and the partners have to do license sales at a certain extent, or subscription sales at a certain extent, combined to the service sales. What I think very interesting is the culture change that happens with that at the OEM. SAP, for example, when you see that partner organizations in the regions are led more and more like sales teams. And in certain areas, you realize that the conversation that you had with your partner manager, which was more or less more topic based, turns to be more and more, of course, sales based. And you talk about account planning and about your numbers and so on and so on. And those partner organizations are measured like an own sector organization. Yeah, next to maybe automotive, DMI, and so on and so on and so on. And I think this is something which will have a huge impact in the next 5 years for the whole SAP partner organizations. That yes, they are seen as the one who brings the horsepower to the street, but you have your duty also in making the groundwork happen. Yeah, in the end.
Which is a positive thing. That's like it sounds like what's being thrust upon both parties is more better hygiene. Yeah, because there really isn't a choice. The way revenue realization is now shifting, there really isn't much of a choice. Just a heavy emphasis on NRR meant that. I mean, the big problem has always been, how do you take a world that used to be in the on-prem days? Like, we have long memories on these things, right? It's been institutional memories of the on-prem world, which isn't as far ago as we think. And still here in a lot of ways, depending on, your customer base, where, you sold the technology, you threw it over the wall, and the partners did whatever they wanted and come what may. And, they bought a capital asset, technology was a capitalized asset, and just go and do your thing. Then we went to cloud, and all of a sudden you had a problem. The technology that was bought as a capital asset with a 5-year amortization plan now turned into an operating expense. And even though the core asset didn't really change, great, TCO went down, blah, blah, blah. But, you had a situation where you just gave the buy side more leverage, right? To say, well, we don't think we're seeing the value. Maybe we're not going to continue paying this operating expense, because now we're thinking about it annually, not as a 5-year depreciable asset. That changed the leverage equation. Even though the reality is we're not just going to rip it out. But then we had a different problem, right? So now you have vendors selling a product, a license, that we get paid on licenses on a net 30-day, 60-day basis, but we get paid on our licenses annually as they pay for it. But our revenue and profit model is license-based. Our partners are typically on a time and materials, type of revenue and profit model. So their interests are obviously, longer scope projects pay us more. The longer it takes for the technology to be operationalized means we got boots on the ground and we're getting paid. We can expand scope once we get underneath the hood. The problem with that is the vendor needs these assets operationalized as quickly as possible to hit the payback period as quickly as possible. So the CFO can't beat them with, we still aren't seeing the cash flows we thought we bought here. Maybe we made a mistake. So you've got these two forces who have different revenue and profit realization and profit models that are almost conflicting with each other. And how do we get the partner to operationalize this as quickly as possible, which might mean less revenue for them, on the hope that we'll sell them more, right? We can now have that expansion conversation, and the partner gets more revenue on the back end, from us selling more product more quickly. But you're dealing with motions that have taken decades to form, and muscle memory that's taken. And I think that's why you're probably seeing this move to say, we're both going to have a problem if we don't fix the NRR problem.
And to add on what you said, this means, of course, for consulting organizations that they have to, or that's another reason, because there are many reasons to do that. That's another reason to move from that kind of self-estimation as, let's say, execute of a technical service into a value-based strategic partner of your customer. Because that's still how very many SAP partners work. Yeah, I'm the executor of a technical service. I get an RFP, customer tells me, let's have a lean migration here. Makes no sense in my opinion, but I'm doing that, because customer first. This means to have, of course, your own vision and your own opinion about these topics. Yeah.
And the hardest thing to do is to walk away from perceived revenue.
Yeah.
and then our brain tricks us. Oh, RFPs. I know unsolicited RFPs have a very low closure rate, but maybe this is the one that does close, or maybe we can influence them. We pull open our shirt, the Superman. I can make this happen. But most of it is our brains tricking us, right?
Yeah.
And it's feeding our pleasure center and not listening to our pain center, which is said this statistically speaking. I would never go to Monte Carlo and play at this table with the odds of winning, and yet I'll invest mine and so many people's time. But I think the sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I think AI is the sunlight that is one of the big things that we're dealing with and shifting. But along with that, it's coming from both sides. AI from one side, and new forced pricing models where the buy side is now kind of revolting and saying, we don't see the value and we're not going to pay unless we realize that value, and we're going to hold our breath until you make some changes. And I think that's what's happening, is that they're holding their breath and we're like, breathe, and cut this PO. What am I missing though? Is there a third factor that we're seeing? There's got to be, not that two is bad enough, right? But it is.
I definitely. And complex enough.
I think it's healthy. I know this sounds terrible, but I think this is the tough love. There's a great line from the movie Platoon, where the old sergeant's talking to the young private, Vietnam. It's very conflicted, and the young idealistic private is like, we're going to win this, right? And Willem Dafoe is like, I don't know. I think we've been kicking butt for so long. It's about time we got our butt kicked. Like, I think a Vietnam reference. I'd show you my age, but I mean, I think this is where we are as a space, and I think it's healthy. I think it's clarifying. We got to change.
Let me ask you a little bit poison question in the beginning, which may get me into trouble if I'm not happy with the result of your answer. But no, I will ask it differently. Young Eric is done with university, and young Eric has 2 job offers, both in sales, one in software sales, one in service sales. Under which conditions would Eric decide for service, and under which condition would Eric decide for software?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think young Eric, who didn't know any better, would feel safer going to the software side of things, where things feel more concrete, more with brighter lines around things. But that's a good question. I think the only thing that probably would convince me to go to the services side, or either side, would be compensation. The promise of the compensation is there, and I can earn it.
Now we are back again at the pure heart of the seller. Compensation.
Oh, without question. Why would anyone choose a sales career if it weren't for the money?
Exactly.
For the love of rejection?
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very masochistic profession in a lot of ways, but yeah, man, we've talked about it. It's all about the money, it's not about the money, because I always check every year on the previous year's quota attainment, the average quota attainment in the SaaS space, especially. And 2024, the number, depending on the source, was about 38% of SaaS quota carriers hit their targets. So it's not only the money that's being dangled in front of me, it's the belief that I can actually realize it.
Quota. Yeah.
And I never sold services until I sold my own, but that was very different. So it's more abstract. I think, it's more abstract. And I think that's what makes it a little bit, and you're depending on humans, do you want to depend on code, or do you want to depend on humans in terms of the quality and the receptivity and the ability for, it to do what it's designed to do.
Comes back at you. Yeah.
And how long does it take me to get paid, right? Because that's another piece of it. But yeah, I'm afraid it all still boils. It boils down to money and the belief that money can be realized, because every quota carrier, I look back on my career, there were some companies and jobs where I killed it, and life was great. And but there was others where I wasn't making the money I thought I was going to make, and part of it was me. Did I pick the wrong space? Did I venture too far from my core, what I knew how to do? But if you're making money, it almost doesn't matter, assuming you don't hate what you do. I don't know, man. I've never been asked that question. It's a good question, but it still comes down to the core beliefs that I'm going to make the money that is going to be the fruit of my labor.
Thank you very much for the honesty. Coming to an end because I spent already too much of your time. What I want to definitely say that if anybody, of course, and I think there will be many people who want to hear more of Eric, and although you stopped that podcast, I still want to mention
It's still there,
and I still want to mention your former podcast as an absolute fantastic source of knowledge and wisdom in that area, which is, by the way, also very entertaining to listen to. And I know of, like, when being on the plane and so on, I had no problems to binge listen to 3 episodes and did not get tired out of that. Can you tell me the name of it and where people can find it?
Yeah, I can indeed. Very kind of you to do this. Yeah, so the podcast, maybe it's just on a sabbatical, but it's called You Buy In This, and it can be found on all your favorite outlets, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And it's it may come back, but it's the reason why we even did it was to focus on sales and marketing. But my other host is a sketch comedy writer by trade, and I'm a wise guy by upbringing. So yeah, we hope it's as entertaining as informative. Yeah, but thank you for bringing it up. Very kind.
And also, it has the best pop culture references on the air. So
for better or for worse.
For better and for worse. And like I said, it's definitely a great source of knowledge. So definitely give it a listen. Eric, awesome. Definitely not the last time we talked. I'm looking forward to the next time already. I hope it will not be in such a long time span like the last time until now.
No, I'm sure it will. Always a pleasure. Yeah, you're never taking too much of my time. It's always great to be on the show. So thanks for the ask. It's brilliant.
I will show you the best single trades here, as promised, when you come back.
Nice. I'll return that favor.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
So, thank you